Hi, my name is Cardozo Campbell, and I want to take this opportunity to endorse President Barack Obama for a second term as President of the United States. 50 years ago, myself and a lot of people in the military were involved in something known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was with a Navy squadron assigned to operate in Japan. We were flying out of Misawa, and our job was to patrol the periphery of the Soviet Union in the Sea of Japan and to cover the straits between the northernmost island of Japan, Hokkaido, the main island, Honshu, and the southernmost island in the Soviet Union, Sakhalin. We were looking for Soviet submarines. What was exciting about this was that we flew under the cover of Soviet fighter aircraft. Well, as we know, the Cuban Missile Crisis was favorably resolved with very little loss of life. We obviously lost the U-2 pilot that was shot down in Cuba with a surface-to-air missile. But what this crisis did, and this is really important, it gave me an appreciation for the power of the President of the United States and the use of diplomacy and strategy and communications to solve a very serious crisis. Now, thank God we did not have a nuclear war, and it was the only time after the Second World War that we had this condition. What was also unique about my squadron is that our regular base in Japan was in Iwakuni. When we would leave the air station, the Marine Corps Air Station, we would fly directly over Hiroshima, 17 miles. And there were days when we would visit the city of Hiroshima and we would see the awesome destructive power of nuclear weapons. And I don't ever want to see anything like that happen again. As a veteran, and frankly I'm appealing to a lot of my fellow veterans, I really have come to admire the way that President Obama has led the reduction in troops in Iraq and the phasing down of troops in Afghanistan. He has managed one crisis after another well. And let me say this. I left the Navy in 1968, and I eventually went into government. I was appointed to a position in the administration of President Nixon. And I worked for the former governor of Michigan, Governor George Romney. And I say that because I want to make a slight comparison between Governor Romney, the Secretary of HUD, and his son, who was running for president. George Romney, the Secretary of HUD, was a man of great candor, great integrity, and great civility, and also a man of great courage, because he led the fight in the executive branch to deal with the quest for open housing. I happen to have been involved in that initiative because Senator Mondale at the time had called me up to testify in front of his committee before I left the Navy. And I had a great appreciation for what Secretary Romney tried to do. I don't know who his son is. I'm frankly flabbergasted. I've never seen a candidate for the President of the United States lie so blatantly. And I don't like to call people liars. I really don't. It's not what gentlemen are supposed to do. And I try to conduct myself as a gentleman. And I've tried to figure him out. I don't know if he's a perfidious puppet. I know there are a lot of puppeteers behind him. The Koch brothers, the neocons, and I think these people continue to lurk in the shadows. And they did something to this country that I've never seen, is to cause a nation go to war without a declaration and destroy hundreds of thousands of lives, people, and cause the dislocation of millions of others, all based on deception. One of the greatest tragedies that ever took place. We've avoided those kind of calamities with President Obama, and I think he deserves another term. But there's more than that. When I served in the administration of President Reagan, I was the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. One of my fellow Spartans, David Stockman, was the director of the Office of Management and Budget. He wrote a book called The Triumph of Politics. And in his book, he said symbolically, if the Economic Development Administration was not phased out, it really meant we were in deep trouble for physical reform in general going forward. I've written quite a few articles about the need for physical reform. I've given a lot of speeches. I think that for whatever reason, people are just tuned out. There are a lot of good books on the subject. I'm not here to promote anybody's book, but here's a book by Thomas Mann and Norm Ornstein, very respected authors at the American Enterprise Institute. I know Norm's over there. It's even worse than it looks. There's another book. It says, Throw Them All Out. It's another good book. Peter Schweitzer. And one of my favorite books by Tom Coburn. He's an OB-GYN, but he used to be an investment banker. He understands what's happening. Now, point to be made here. How do we get out of Dodge? What are we going to do? Do we continue to listen to the Republicans who have this carrot? You know what it's called? No new taxes. Tax reduction. Folks, let me tell you something. I'm a businessman. I've been in the market since I was 22 years old. I've had the privilege of serving on the board of a dozen public corporations. And I don't want to seem less than modest, but it's appropriate. A couple of years ago, I was elected to the Directorship 100, ostensibly the 100 most powerful directors in corporate America. And I'm not interested in boasting on myself. That's not my style. But what I want to do, I want to put something in perspective. Very simple math. You have revenues on one side, you have expenditures on the other. You cannot close the gap like this, okay, without generating revenues and reducing entitlements. Somebody needs to tell the truth, and that's what's been missing in the debate. But the most outrageous statements that I've seen have come from Mitt Romney. He must think we're a bunch of idiots. We need to get our physical house in order, and for someone to try to tell you that taxes will not be raised, and if he wants to say he's not going to raise taxes, okay, he can say that. But don't say concurrently you're going to balance the budget. Ain't going to happen, folks, all right? We all are going to have to feel the pain. The president can run on his record, okay? Let me tell you what that record is. It's not a record of promises. It's a record of performance. Let me just give you a few things. Pay equity for women. The Affordable Care Act, which saves lives, okay? He saved General Motors and Chrysler. I went to Michigan State. I know a little something about the automobile industry, okay? Because a lot of my friends worked in the plants. The challenge with China is not to get tough, it's to get smart. I've been to Beijing, I've been to Shanghai, I've interacted with some of the most influential businessmen over there and some of the highest ranking government leaders in China. It is a great nation. And remember this, China buys more General Motors automobiles than anyone. So we want to be very careful about the criticism for China. And I think President Obama has managed the trade issue with great skill and saved quite a few jobs in the tire industry as a result. Let me say this. The president has a significant plan to go forward. I don't know why his adversary or opponent wants to say he doesn't have a plan. The President of the United States has been speaking about energy independence. It has a plan for energy independence. He has a plan to build the infrastructure. He has a plan to improve education. he has a plan for equitable taxes. With President Obama, we have a choice of diplomacy over destruction, of dignity over desperation, of decency over despair, and more than anything, of faith instead of fear. Be very careful when a politician starts playing the fear card with you. Don't believe it. And the last thing I want to say to you is this. There's a group called the Tea Party out here, and ostensibly they're all about physical austerity. Folks, I've been down that path. I led the fight in the bureaucracy to try to shut down the Economic Development Administration. That was the policy of President Reagan. But you know something? I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. The Tea Party is about power. It's about control. And when I was interviewed by William Burroughs for his book over 13 years ago, you know what I said? At its worst, the government is about deception and power is about abuse. We've got a nation out here that really is where everybody wants to be. We cannot let America fail. The leadership coming from the White House is critical to our future. And remember, Pericles in the golden age of Greece said, the challenge is to participate. So I urge you to participate, to support President Obama. If you are a veteran, think of what Mrs. Obama has done to help the veterans when they return to the United States. Think about what the president has done to create jobs for veterans. And think about industry is doing to help the veterans get jobs when they return from overseas. Think about what the President of the United States has been able to endure with a Republican House that has been bent on undermining him, that has created phenomenal resistance during a time of war. Nobody talks about treason. Folks, this is really important. He's been tested. He has been tested under tremendous adverse conditions. He's going to get my vote, and I ask you to give him yours. Thank you.